Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about a book I literally bought at Barnes & Noble solely because of the cover. This is The Nightmare Man by J.H. Markert. Markert? I think I've been saying Market, but Markert. This cover just screamed spooky season to me. It just screamed fall with this like evil looking scarecrow and like the cornfield and the orange sky. And I read the premise and I was like, ooh, this sounds really, really interesting. Like, I don't know anything about the author. And I found out later this is a pen name for an author who primarily does like historical fiction, I believe, or historical novels. And this is his very first horror novel. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I just wanted to share that with y'all because I very, very, very rarely blindly buy a book. The last time I blindly bought a book based solely on like the cover and then like read it, because I do have a couple that I have just like sitting here that I haven't read yet, but that was The Chestnut Man, and that was my favorite book of 2021, I believe, and honestly one of my favorite books of all time. So sometimes I trust my gut with kind of the cover buy. Sometimes they actually do work when you judge the book. So let me read the inside flap for y'all so you guys know the premise. Blackwood Mansion looms, surrounded by nightmare pines, atop the hill over the small town of New Haven. Ben Bookman, best-selling novelist and heir to the Blackwood estate, spent a weekend at the ancestral home to finish writing his latest horror novel, The Scarecrow. Now, on the eve of the book's release, the terrible story within begins to unfold in real life. Detective Mills arrives at the scene of a gruesome murder, a family butchered and bundled inside cocoons stitched from corn husks and hung from the rafters of a barn, eerily mirroring the opening of Bookman's latest novel. When another family is killed in a similar manner, Mills, along with his daughter, rookie detective Samantha Blue, is determined to find the link to the book and the killer before the story reaches its chilling climax. As the series of Scarecrow crimes continues to mirror the book, Ben quickly becomes the prime suspect. He can't remember much from the night he finished writing the novel, but he knows he wrote it in the atrium, his grandfather's forbidden room full of numbered books, thousands of books, books without words. As Ben digs deep into Blackwood's history, he learns he may have triggered a release of something trapped long ago, and it won't stop with the horrors buried within the pages of his book. So this book, I will be completely honest, was not at all what I was expecting. I was really expecting like some kind of crime thriller, serial killer mystery. It's not. It's definitely more of like a supernatural ghost story with kind of these crimes hidden. It almost reminds me of like an adult Scooby-Doo. There's just a lot of layers and a lot of characters and a lot of mysteries going on that are trying to lead you in one direction but are secretly pulling you to another direction. But I think for me the biggest thing with this novel that I wasn't expecting is that it is more horror and more supernatural than it is like crime thriller. And that didn't bother me at all, but usually when I pick up a book because I think it's a crime thriller, I'm kind of trying to find the answers to all of the happenings in like a logistic, realistic way. And then when you add supernatural, I'd say in this one it's not really a like an easy way out, the way that I feel like some novels have done before. I thought this was very complex and very well done, and the mystery that unraveled really unraveled into something much larger than I was anticipating, and I did enjoy it and appreciate it, but I do just want to put out there that it is not a crime thriller. This is a supernatural horror story with crime thriller as kind of the narrative segue. I also loved how flawed all of our main characters are. Something I truly love in a good book are flawed characters. If I read a story and our hero is Superman, we have a Clark Kent who's perfect, no flaws whatsoever, I get bored really, really quickly. But between Ben Bookman and his wife, especially Detective Mills, and his daughter, we had 4 fairly strong, extremely flawed characters. And then you have a lot of kind of gray characters who come in and out of the story where you're really not sure where they lean either. One of the things that I do like, and I was a little worried about this story, is the like quote unquote who did it reveal was somebody that was under our nose the whole time. And I like that because there are certain parts of the novel where I was like, oh, they're just kind of like introducing random characters to like pin a reveal on them, and that ended up not being the overall case. So I did like the kind of red herrings that we were getting from J.H. Markert when it came to who he wanted us to believe was our quote-unquote villain. I thought the setting of this was beautiful. I really, really loved the idea of this kind of small town with all of these barns and these cornfields and this really kind of scary scarecrow. I will say the first half of the book is more contained into something that could actually happen in reality versus the second half. And I really liked the simplicity of the first half. I thought it was really scary and well done and kind of disturbing. It reminded me a lot of the Hannibal TV series, like some of the first episodes in that, and I really just loved reading about the crime investigations and the attention to detail to the crime, the parallels that it had to the story that Ben Bookman wrote. I thought that was very tastefully done and very, very clever. And then as we get further on into the book is where I felt the book sort of kind of fell into more of like horror movie cliches. And I wouldn't say that in a bad way, but the second half of the book was very original and unique, but it was filled with concepts I've seen done many, many times over, just maybe not done in this particular way. I know I mentioned this in a previous video, but this book tries so hard to make moths scary, and I love moths. And it was trying so hard to kind of make them seem like these like kind of evil leeches that are like almost like pests, and I was just like, oh, they're just so cute and fuzzy. So every time I read scenes with the moths in them, and there's moths all throughout the novel, I just thought it was adorable. But I could totally see how if you didn't like moths, like if they were spiders, I would be so freaked out. But yes, I also really, really loved the description of the Blackwood Mansion. I thought it was beautiful. I feel like an issue that I'm having with this book right now is that I just read this, but I've also been reading The Witch Elm by Tana French, and I feel like both of these stories have very, very similar narratives to get their characters into these old family mansions, and I couldn't help but really, really parallel the two of them. And since I started The Witch Elm beforehand, but then finished The Nightmare Man before I finished The Witch Elm, I'm kind of like, they're kind of bleeding together in my mind with their similarities. So I'm really interested to finish The Witch Elm soon and then be able to compare it to this, just because one is like just a very true crime thriller type story, and this was so supernatural, but the narrative devices to get our main characters into these ancestral homes felt very, very similar. This is another great novel where familial horror is used. I really love when you use family dynamics to create horror, even in a supernatural setting, and this is something that Anya Ahlborn does so well. But when you have these kind of family ties and family loyalties to horror that make everything else kind of pale in comparison, it's just so brilliant. And J.K. Markert didn't do as good of a job as Anya Ahlborn does, but did do a very, very good and clever job at making family horror and really playing up the dysfunctional family. I loved his use of like the creepy kid. He's got two characters in this novel that are children, and they are, in my opinion, both kind of creepy, but done in drastically different ways. So they felt very compelling to read about and very unnerving to read about without feeling annoying. Like you could really see how these two kids too were related, but also just vastly different. And it really brought up the idea of nurture versus nature. And again, just the emphasis on ancestry and familial ties and the horrors of accepting who you could become because of who your family was so well done in this book. And it really, to me, was like the shining aspect of the horror of this novel, not so much the supernatural. And I think when the things that can happen in reality are far scarier than the things that happen outside of reality in a horror book, I feel like that's the sign of good horror storytelling, and definitely a way to keep the reader interested. So I don't want to spoil this book too much, just because it was such a fun shelf buy, and I definitely want to recommend it to anybody. If you guys are looking for something good for spooky season, definitely pick this up. I really, really loved the setting. The first half of the book was definitely stronger, but it's just because it was more of what I was looking for from the book. And the Scarecrow, like, murders are just so terrifying. And if you've seen the Hannibal series with Mads Mikkelsen, you will love the first half of this book. The second half isn't bad by any means, but it does take a different route, and it is very twisty and turny and kind of all over the place, and a totally different tone from the original, from the first half, but still definitely worth the read. I would love to see more from J.H. Markert. I do know that he has a new book coming out, I think called like The Lullaby Monster, something to do with like sleepscape again. And I think the way that he talked about dreams and the way that dreams were utilized in this novel was just really creative and well done, and I loved it. And you know what? This is another thing that I feel like a lot of writers are doing. Ronald Malfi does it a lot. Stephen King does it a lot. Stephen King probably does it the most famously. But the idea of making a main character a writer, and also an alcoholic, which I feel like is just so cliche at this point. But the way that J.H. Markert did it, it was definitely unique by using this very, very overdone trope, and then just finding ways to use it against our main character. It was really fun to watch the book unravel, because I'm so used to reading works by King where like you can kind of see like, oh, the alcoholism's going to be your downfall, right? And you're going to spiral into this. And the fact that the book was kind of self-aware that the reader would be like keying into that and was like, you know what, we're gonna turn it on its head and do something different that you don't see coming with this particular narrative device, I thought was really, really clever. So 4-star read for me. Definitely not a book that blew me out of the water, but it was a book that I thoroughly enjoyed from start to finish. Thought was creative, thought had a lot of really, really good ideas and concepts and a really fun narrative voice that kept me interested, and we'll definitely be reading more from J.H. Markert. I would put this in the same category as like The Spite House, except I liked this much, much more. But there were so many moments in both The Spite House and The Nightmare Man that I was like, oh my god, when you continue to write like more horror novels, you're just gonna elevate yourself and become like a really pivotal force in the horror world. Like you can just see that they've got everything that they need to really nail the landing, and I feel like next book, it's just gonna hit all the marks. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. I am going out of town for several weeks, so the videos are all going to be like scheduled, so hopefully that is kind of the days that I have them scheduled for, but I'll know more as the week continues. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!